Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis.
Oh, cool.
Today, we're diving deep into The Supreme Court, the U.S. Government, How It Works by Heather Lehr Wagner.
Okay.
Our goal is to understand how the Supreme Court went from barely a mention in the Constitution to the powerhouse it is today.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story, isn't it? I mean, think about it. The Constitution barely outlines its role, yet its decisions impact every aspect of American life.
Right. Imagine this. It's 1790, and it's the first Supreme Court session.
Okay.
And only 3 of the 6 justices even show up.
Wow.
And they have 0 cases to hear.
That's a far cry from the court's stature today, that's for sure.
Talk about a low-key start.
Yeah, those early justices, they faced low-pay, grueling travel demands.
Yeah.
And a lot of them even struggled financially. It's really not surprising they weren't exactly lining up for the job.
No, but then Chief Justice John Marshall enters the scene, and boom, everything changes.
He really is the architect of the court's rise to power.
He is?
Marshall really understood the court's potential to shape the nation. He's the one who started the practice of issuing a single opinion of the court.
Oh, interesting.
Instead of having a jumble of individual opinions from each justice, there was now one unified voice, and that really strengthened the court's authority.
It's interesting how something so seemingly simple can have such a profound impact.
Yeah.
Then there's Marbury v. Madison, this tiny little case about a delayed commission which gave birth to what we know as judicial review.
It was honestly brilliant what Marshall did there. By declaring a law unconstitutional, he established the Supreme Court as the ultimate interpreter of the Constitution. It really was a turning point in American history.
And speaking of impactful cases, Dred Scott certainly comes to mind.
Yeah, Dred Scott, that's a tough one. It's a reminder of the court's ability to sometimes uphold harmful societal norms. I mean, declaring that African Americans could never be citizens just poured fuel on the fire leading up to the Civil War.
It's a dark moment in history, but it highlights how closely the court's decisions are tied to the American story, both the good and the bad.
Absolutely, and we see this pattern repeating throughout history. Take Plessy v. Ferguson, for example, with its separate but equal doctrine.
Right.
The court solidifying a harmful practice, and then years later, Brown v. Board of Education comes along and overturns that very same doctrine.
It's almost like watching a pendulum swing back and forth, mirroring the changes in American society.
Exactly. And the court, it continues to shape our world today. Cases like Miranda v. Arizona, Roe v. Wade, these are landmark decisions that are still sparking debate and discussion. It's incredible the lasting impact that the court has.
I know. It's amazing how an institution that started out so overlooked and understaffed transformed into this powerful force in American life.
I know from those early days of justices dodging debt collectors to a court deciding cases that reshape the nation. It's pretty remarkable.
It really is. And we'll dive deeper into this transformation after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more on the Supreme Court, right here on Mindful Moments.
Sounds good. So we talked about the Supreme Court's evolution and some of the major cases that shaped it, but how do cases even get there? Thousands of cases are filed each year, but only a handful are actually heard.
Yeah, it's a super exclusive club. How do they choose which cases get in? What makes a case Supreme Court worthy?
Well, it's a pretty rigorous process. The justices and their clerks, they carefully review petitions, and they're looking for cases that raise really important legal questions or have implications for the entire country, or cases that could set a precedent for future rulings.
So it's not just about resolving the specific case at hand, but about its potential impact on the legal landscape.
Exactly. Every decision has a ripple effect. It influences how the Constitution is interpreted for years to come.
That's a lot of pressure on the justices.
It is, and on the lawyers arguing the cases, too. Oral arguments before the Supreme Court, they're like this high-stakes chess match. The lawyers spend weeks, sometimes months, crafting their arguments, and they know they're going to face tough questions from the justices.
I can only imagine the nerves standing there trying to make your case before 9 of the most brilliant legal minds in the country.
Oh, it's intense, for sure. But those arguments are a critical part of the court's decision-making process.
So what happens after the lawyers have presented their arguments? Does the court just vote right then and there?
Nope. Behind closed doors, the justices meet in complete secrecy to deliberate and vote.
No cameras, no reporters, nothing.
Nothing. It's just them. Each justice brings their own unique perspective and interpretation of the Constitution to the table.
Sounds like it could get pretty heated in those discussions.
Oh, it can, especially on those really complex or controversial cases. Reaching a consensus is no easy feat. And even once they do agree on a verdict, they still have to write the opinions.
Oh, right. Those written explanations we've been talking about.
Yeah, exactly. The majority opinion, it lays out the verdict, but also the reasoning and the precedents behind it. It helps shape how future cases might be decided. Then you've got the dissenting opinions where justices who disagree can voice their alternative viewpoints.
It's like a dialogue on paper, preserving the court's internal debates for all to see.
You got it. Those opinions are carefully studied and debated by lawyers, scholars, anyone who's interested in understanding how American law evolves over time.
Okay, so we've talked about how cases make it to the Supreme Court and the decision-making process. But let's talk about the impact these decisions have on the real world. It's easy to get lost in all the legal details and forget that these rulings affect people's lives.
You're absolutely right. We can't lose sight of the human element. Remember Brown v. Board of Education? That decision didn't just overturn legal precedent, it ignited a movement. It desegregated schools and transformed American society.
And Miranda v. Arizona. It changed the entire landscape of criminal justice, ensuring that the rights of the accused are protected.
Exactly. And even the cases that spark controversy, like Roe v. Wade, they highlight just how deeply the court's decisions impact our lives. They shape national conversations and influence public policy for generations.
Right, but the court's power and influence aren't without their critics. We've seen that their decisions aren't always in line with the nation's conscience or the prevailing sense of justice.
That's true. Dred Scott serves as a stark reminder that the court can sometimes make decisions that uphold deeply flawed societal norms.
Yeah, reflecting the prejudices of their time.
Exactly. And we see this debate continuing today with rulings like Citizens United,
Right.
which has raised questions about the court's role in campaign finance and its influence on the political landscape.
So how do we grapple with the fact that this institution holds so much power?
It's a question that's been debated since the very beginning. How do we ensure that an institution with lifetime appointments and the final say on legal matters remains accountable to the people it serves?
That's a question that goes to the heart of our democracy.
It does, and it's one we should all be thinking about.
It's mind-boggling when you think about it, how much power rests in the hands of those 9 justices. Their rulings have the potential to impact pretty much every facet of American life.
Yeah, their decisions reach far beyond the courtroom. They shape education, voting rights, personal liberties, all of it. It's a heavy responsibility.
And as we've seen, that responsibility comes with a history of both progress and some pretty significant missteps. We talked about Brown v. Board of Education, a major victory in the fight for racial equality. But then there's Dred Scott, a stark reminder that the court can get it wrong sometimes with devastating consequences.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought, isn't it? It shows that even the Supreme Court isn't immune to the currents of its time. It reflects and sometimes reinforces the prevailing social and political forces.
Which raises a really important question in a system designed with checks and balances. How do we make sure that the court, with its lifetime appointments and so much power, remains accountable to the people it's supposed to serve?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's a debate that's been going on since the very beginning. Some argue for term limits, others for more transparency in the selection process.
And then there's the whole debate about judicial activism versus judicial restraint.
Right. How actively should the court interpret the Constitution, especially when it comes to contemporary issues?
It's a tough one because the Constitution itself is a living document. It doesn't offer easy answers to every modern-day problem.
That's where legal precedent interpretation and maybe even a little bit of creative thinking come into play. The court has to consider the original intent of the Constitution, but also the evolving understanding of rights and justice. It's a delicate balancing act.
It's fascinating, but also kind of daunting to think about the weight of those decisions. The court isn't just shaping legal precedent, it's shaping the very fabric of American society.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for all of us as citizens to engage with the court's work. Understanding its history, the logic behind its decisions, and even the controversy surrounding it is crucial for informed participation in our democracy.
So for our listeners who want to learn more, where's a good place to start?
Well, the book we've been discussing, The Supreme Court, the U.S. Government, How It Works, by Heather Lehr Wagner, is a great place to begin. It offers a really clear and accessible overview of the court's structure, its processes, and some of its most landmark decisions.
It's a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to dig a little deeper into how this powerful institution works.
And for those of you who enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into thought-provoking books just like this one. You can also purchase The Supreme Court, the U.S. Government, How It Works, using the link in the episode description.
We hope you've enjoyed this journey through the history and impact of the Supreme Court. Until next time, keep those minds engaged and those moments mindful.